The next speaker is Judge Renata. Judge Renata, thank you very much for joining us. We meet each other in Sao Paulo, and then you were our guest at France-Amériques in Paris 8-10 months ago. So you know Hotel Le Marois. It's always very interesting to discuss with you, Renata. You have many expertise in philosophy, in sociology, and of course in the legal sector. All the time when we are talking together, you are calling for a new social contract. You are also lately asking people to have a new global agenda in order to maintain a coordinated actions and conversation all over the world. So today, I'm very curious to share this dialogue with you, Renata. As I started to say, you are a judge, you are an author, and you are also a professor in Sao Paulo. Today, you would like to have this speech with three parts. The first part, you are proposing to have a brief speech on fake news and the law and how the speed asymmetry may turn judiciary action nearly innocuous. Secondly, we would like to speak about how the concern regarding the undefined nature of online platforms and how it may threaten freedom of speech. Thirdly, we would like Judge Renata to share with us your thought on how misinformation is fought or could be fight with more information. Thank you again for joining us, Judge Renata.
Thank you, Oban. Thank you for having me. Well, as Oban said, I'm a state judge in São Paulo, Brazil. I'm also part of a digital law study group in the São Paulo Magistrate School. I'm a blockchain researcher in the Blockchain Research Institute, Brazil, and also a teacher. Well, thank you for having me on this webinar series about the management of the COVID-19 crisis promoted by Berkeley Global Society and France-Amériques. Thank you again, Oban, and all the fellow speakers. I'm really happy to be here. Well, as a disclaimer, following M's example, I would like to say that my opinions don't reflect the State São Paulo Court opinions. Okay, and I will take a broader approach to this subject. Actually, for us to have a broader view of the fake news nature and how misinformation can be really damaging. So, fake news, just like COVID-19, has no borders. It spreads quickly and leaves a trail of serious consequences. Rumors, fraudulent or distorted stories are as old as mankind communication. So, if you think about the evolution of press, only a few enterprises chose what subject would be presented for people. The barriers to be a player on the media market were really high. And now we are living different times when enterprises are built to provide a place where every single user can control, supposedly, their flow of information. And there's a uniqueness of this present age. The cost of moving information is near to zero. People are given a power that has never existed before in history, and we can share all sorts of information. We have never been so connected online. As Professor Kaling has mentioned before, that's a good and a bad thing. That it pretty much looks like a Pandora box. The good thing is that people are manifesting their opinion. The bad thing is that this possibility has brought us to a level what the World Health Organization has called an infodemia, an epidemic of fake news. So, social media, along with the tracing of user profiles, has built a very friendly environment for permeable content bubbles, where one is exposed to only what calls one's attention. Once everyone is looking for information about COVID-19, all sorts of news, real or fake ones, like the information zombies, are serious candidates on the click run. But what are fake news? Since the task of defining what is true and what is not is due to philosophy, I looked for the meaning of fake news on the Cambridge Dictionary. And there, fake news are defined as false stories that appear to be news, spread on the internet or using other media, usually created to influence political views or as a joke. I would like to call your attention to the first part of the definition presented. False stories that appear to be news. That is, stories that do not meet the standards of journalism, although they pretend to mimic the real news, usually by using a nugget of truth and then distorting everything else, presenting features like sensationalism, extremism, or exploring fear, anxiety, or the feeling of scarcity. And the problem relies on the distortion that leads us to a state of information disorder. On a pandemic, fake news exposes people to risk, as well as wears out their trust on the state leaders, on science, and weakens adherence to sanitary and health recommendations, not to mention the possibility of becoming apathetic to news, like on a saturation level, where nothing seems important at all. In the economic and social consequences, they are incalculable. Unfortunately, the judiciary is unable to largely control the disinformation resulting from the spread of fake news. And believe me, that hurts me a lot, especially because that's what I do most of my day. And why is that? First, because the abstract nature of the discussion of what is true and what is not. That is a discussion that is out of borders of court ruling, unless we've got a defamatory content or the declaration itself has a criminal nature, like racism, hate speech, human rights violation, and things like that. On an ideal world, imagine that the legal request could be filed immediately. Even if urgent measures were granted in the short term, let's say in 24 hours, we would be still a day away from reaching the facts of intense sharing of fake news. The very characteristics, the very nature of a judicial process, which demand the maturity of facts and evidence, print a slow pace to it in such a way that it becomes unable to completely contain the sowing of fake news or even to reach all of its recipients. There is a clear speed asymmetry here. And despite the possibility of attributing the legal consequence for damages caused, law is not always able to revert events to their previous state. A situation that becomes even more dramatic when embedded with the risks of life and health, as in the case of fake news concerning COVID-19. This obviously does not mean that we don't have enough repression. There are ways to look for those who fund bulk messaging, as well as malicious owners of automation bots. There are crime penalties, there's damage repair, but that's clearly not enough. It's like treating a disease only when the patient gets to the hospital, but not by reaching him before contagion. There are a few individual initiatives worried to clear the nature of some posts. On Twitter, for example, Bot Sentinel is a platform developed to detect and track political bots, troll bots, and untrustworthy accounts, which findings are published on Twitter. Therefore, Bot Sentinel followers are aware of what tweets or hashtags are being artificially promoted. There's also a sleeping giant that persuades brands not to advertise on the sites that publish fake news. Sleeping Giant is also disclosing its sections on Twitter, both when ads are removed and when they are not. So as we can see, on both cases, there is profit involved and the possibility to follow the money until the fake news zero. Unfortunately, that's not enough either, because we aren't able to figure out who's been exposed to misinformation. So how should we face fake news in the days of COVID-19? Would it be the case to monitor all the content to try to spot the birth of fake news? Would it be good to overlook guarantees such as freedom of speech and start a state of surveillance? I believe not even on a pandemic scenario. Social networks and communication platforms reach an enormous number of people and are a friendly means of fake news transmission, but also a place where users got used to manifest their opinion and engage on discussions. However, to evaluate if the platforms should control the content shared by the users, we must first assess their nature. Are platforms as Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter publishers? If we come to a conclusion that yes, then Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter can evaluate the content freely and analyze whether it is compatible with their editorial line, bearing the burden of the responsibility that comes from it. I didn't want to quote Uncle Ben on this one. I don't know if you've seen Spider-Man, but with great powers come great responsibility. So if those platforms are considered publishers, they must bear the burden of the responsibility that comes from it. On another perspective, if platforms are not publishers, can they be considered public forums? Are they digital spaces where freedom of speech is practiced? And if so, only the ones posting content will be subject to legal consequences, and the platforms won't be able to determine what matters each user will be exposed to. Pushing our thoughts a little further, can platforms benefit from the guarantees of a public forum and yet have editorial control as a publisher? And you can see where I'm going here. Legislators must be very careful when regulating social media platforms, or they will be regulating individual speech with a legislation that would be enforced by platforms that probably would feel especially prone to control certain themes of their interest. Should then platforms self-regulate? Well, I'm very skeptical about how successful self-regulation would be in this case. When it comes to dissemination of content, none of those platforms comes clear about how attention dependent their business model is. They are built to create an addiction and to feel like a friendly, hospitable place where you connect to your loved ones. And because of that atmosphere, some people actually think that social networks are the internet and reliable sources of information, ignoring the fact that they are being exposed to carefully curated content. Nevertheless, the idea of exposing freedom of speech to a self-regulatory environment seems too risky. Having said that, it is clear that the solution that prevents most damage comes before any action taken from the judiciary. Misinformation must be restlessly faced with education and with more information. Once fake news are spotted, the corrected version should be diffused on the same place, whether social network or communication application. Weapons of mass opinion must be dealt with the same kind of action. And the truth is, as Professor Kaelan mentioned, no, the corrected version is not as interesting as the original version is, because the original version actually appeals to our primal instincts, and the corrected version doesn't. Concerning the correction versions, the United Nations organization has developed a program called Verified in order to fight disinformation, and is mobilizing volunteers to share information provided by the platform. These volunteers, they are described as a team of digital emergency, and they will receive verified content every single day with the task of forwarding it on their networks. So, they are looking for digital influencers, enterprises, amongst others, to spread content about COVID-19. Truth is, real news should reach people as easily as the fake ones. So people need to be educated to be able to question sources, narratives, authenticity, as well as their own impulses when sharing a certain content. Besides, people should be encouraged to check the sources and data, reflecting upon it. And that's not a natural human behavior, especially when it comes to a subject that reaches an instinctive feeling like fear, anxiety, scarcity. And what I think could be a solution to help this scenario, to help to ease in this scenario, would be blockchain. Blockchain is known as the trust protocol, and it's a great way to ensure data integrity and to automate that process. And I promise I'll be quick on my considerations on blockchain, because I can speak about this for the entire day, and unfortunately we just have a schedule here that should be observed, but I'll be quick. Blockchain is the technology behind Bitcoin, or as Don Tapscott usually says, it's the Internet of Value. Blockchain is the distributed ledger technology, and its features make it possible to deliver a single version of data. In other words, blockchain solves the double spending problem. This means that once the information about a journalistic reporting is registered on the blockchain, it will have its own unique identification. Thus, everyone who reads it can authenticate its content promptly. That would help with the information zombies as well. And even on the scientific world, when a study is put up for evaluation for peer review, and once it's not approved, it can be removed, and the authentication process would allow that as well. And that's just a suggestion, just an idea that came to me during Caitlin's amazing speech. And blockchain could even bring an incentive mechanism for people to check the authenticity of a certain matter by using reward marks and offering, maybe, who knows, access to exclusive content. For example, if a user authenticates the written content, he can get access to video or podcast on that subject. And if he does that consistently for a period of time, he can donate access to content for his favorite charity cause. So the incentive mechanism would help educate consumers to behave towards legitimate content. And you all may be thinking that there's nothing to stop malicious content from being registered on a blockchain. And yes, that is right. You're going to ask me that, right, Oban? I can see that. Yes, malicious content could also be registered on a blockchain, but that turns the spread of fake news more expensive. And at the same time, it would increase the risk of tracing fake news back to its source, while building immutable proof of the dissemination of fake news, allowing the evaluation of the probable number of people exposed to it. Besides, the reputation of the vehicle will become even more important, as well as a clear editorial line. So, nowadays, there are a few good initiatives regarding the use of blockchain as a way to validate content, so that consumers could finally have a guarantee that what they are receiving wasn't adulterated at all. As reported by CoinDesk, the New York Times and IBM are running the proof of concept project to authenticate news photos on a permissioned blockchain. And in fact, according to a Gartner report, in the next 3 years, 30% of the entire news and video content will be authenticated through blockchain. And that is how we can trust a source of information and avoid deepfakes, for example. But still, just as people needed to be educated on how to surf the web and make transactions online, now they need to be educated to look for trustworthy source and question the information they are getting, as well as the narrative built upon it. They need to be educated to look for authenticated content, never to miss that information is the core of choice, and choice is the core of democracy. And that is what I had to say, everyone. Thank you again for having me. I'm up for questions if anyone has any. Thank you, Oban. Thank you, Berkeley Global Society and Cercle France-Amériques.
Thank you, Renata. Thank you for joining us. I was sure you will come with blockchain and technology, and I do believe that it's a wonderful tool. But there are some limits. I really like this idea that today we can produce fake news without money. It's cheap. So it's very interesting, because when we are thinking about some revolutions by the past, the first thing was to take the control of the TV or of the journals. So today it's changing. So let's see how the technology could help us. Maybe Professor Kailin, you would like to add something to what said Judge Renata?
Sorry, I was distracted because I was reading this question from William Ryle. Sorry, add something just in general to Renata's comments?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have anything to add. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
It was really, really useful, and I hadn't thought at all about this blockchain idea. I find it very intriguing.
Great. So I guess we have a question here. It's more about about this democracy concept that you were taking as a conclusion, Judge Renata. I received many questions regarding what would you suggest regarding what's happened yesterday with Trump. You know, there is this debate now in the United States, Trump saying that he would stop the platform of the social media of Twitter because he do believe that there are some restrictions against Republicans. So what do you think about it? What about this risk and how we should take care of it?
Well, as I said during my speech, I think that it's really hard for us to regulate the platforms because it's really hard to stop regulating a platform, to find the exact point where you stop regulating a platform and start regulating freedom of speech. And we can't, we just can't limit freedom of speech, otherwise we'll be limiting freedom itself. So the thing is, we really have to think thoroughly about what is the nature of these platforms and how can we think maybe on an architectural level on how these platforms could work. For instance, if we have, and I'm saying this on a theoretical basis, obviously, not on a scientific basis, and there's nothing that I know that is being developed on this matter, but I think that we must think of guaranteeing freedom of speech, and maybe if these platforms, if the social media platforms could be connected to like a blockchain platform and authenticate automatically the news that are shared, that would be a way of having news, having opinion, and actually making certain news more relevant than others in that stream. Because the platforms, they also choose what we are going to see. Platforms build a bubble around us based on our likes, on our dislikes, on our commenting activity and things like that, because they want us to spend more time on the platforms, and that's okay. I'm not judging the business model, but we must always wonder about the unknown. Otherwise, we're going to stay captured in our bubbles, and our own development will be seriously prejudiced, you know. So I can't manifest my opinion on the conduct of a political leader or condemn or something that Mr. Trump has said, but I can say that I'm for freedom of speech.
Thank you, Judge Renata. Thank you for your inspiring speech, for your ideas. This is what we are looking for at France-Amériques all the time. So it's analysis, but also to propose new models. We understand that with some new tools, we could secure those information.